Hey everyone, a warm welcome to all of you. I'm Nisha Khatwani, Community Manager at Gap, and in today's Gupshup, we would be shining the spotlight on what's next in supply chain, logistics 4.0, and the role of technology. This virtual event has been organized by Gap, the Global Association for Planning and Strategy Professionals. Joining us today is Siddhartha Srivastava, Associate Director, Supply Chain Design, Freight Tiger, the largest software-enabled digital freight network. Siddhartha is a supply chain leader with over 15 years of experience in both supply chain consulting and operations across diverse industries such as e-commerce, retail, chemicals, and mining. He has worked at national level positions managing complex supply chain networks equipped with large distributed teams and set up e-commerce operations from the ground up. From devising and implementing necessary processes, 3PL, all the way to the last mile omni-channel delivery. Today, during the session, Siddhartha will give us a lowdown on what is Logistics 4.0, the impact of COVID on industries and their supply chains, and what technologies are being unlocked, emerging trends that are being observed, such as omni-channel strategies, e-mobility solutions, and smart visibility and control towers, technologies that have gained prominence outside India and their respective adoption timelines. It's going to be one insight impact session. Before I hand over the floor to Siddhartha, I want to mention this would be a recorded session, so our members can watch it later. Also, the purpose of these talks is to foster learning, so request everyone to share their views, questions, and opinions at the end of the talk, or you could drop it in the chat box below. Welcome, Siddhartha. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks, Nisha. Thanks for the introduction. Welcome, everyone, and I hope everyone is safe and healthy at home with their family members. Just a brief introduction of myself. Currently, I'm working with Freight Tiger, and what Freight Tiger does is we have a software platform through which we digitize and automate the logistics processes, and those processes which are generally not covered by a typical ERP system. So, namely, let's say freight procurement. So, you would like to automate how a particular indent should be allocated to a transporter, and then electronic proof of delivery, automation of the freight payments, etc. And we also have a bidding and auction platform. So in the end, we want to cover the end-to-end logistics process and work on certain KPIs which can help the companies to reduce their costs or improve the customer experience. And we are very much focusing on the customer's experience because now the logistics role, as I will be covering, logistics role is evolving from the cost function. How can it impact the better delivery services to the end customer? And that's going to be changed in the next 5-6 years across all the industry. Before this, I worked with Accenture ENY. I started my career with ENY and Accenture. Spent somewhere around 6 years in consulting, primarily on the business process reengineering, a bit on the logistics and supply chain planning. Then as Nisha said, I led the supply chain for mobile store. It was at that time was a leading retail store, retail chain for mobile handsets, and got the opportunity to implement the omni-channel strategy through which we wanted to leverage the store network and deliver to the customer within 2 hours of order compared to what other e-commerce companies do in 2 days or 3 days. That was the idea, and we worked very well on the setting up the processes and the systems for that. Moving ahead, let me share the. Is it visible, Nisha?
Yes, Siddhartha, we can see you.
Great. So essentially, 3 or 4 agenda. One is how the typical current landscape of Indian logistics, which you all are already aware of, some broad point around how is the logistics cost as a percent of GDP, how is it different from other developed nations, what are the inefficiencies, and you might be as a logistics professional, you're already facing those challenges. The second is the COVID impact. Again, a very high level of 4 or 5 points, which has impacted the supply chain across different industries. And but again, not to reiterate many things because you already facing it in last 1.5 years in trying to solve these problems and probably have solved these problems. And then I'll get into what I have as while working with Freight Tiger, especially what I've experienced in 3-4 industries, what business area the companies are focusing on, and what kind of technological levers they are using. And I will not be focusing too much on what you keep hearing. And if you search on Google supply chain 4.0, you probably hear blockchain, AI, ML. Those areas I will not be covering because that will take, those are very broader technology and that will take some time to get evolved and adopted. Primarily, generally, what we do in India is we see any technology being used abroad and then we adopt it to ourselves, which is a good strategy. However, what I'm seeing here in India, I'll be last 2 3 years that I'll be covering, and then I get into the last part in broad terms, different technologies, not necessarily just in India, and what is the trend, what is the impact, and what is the timeline and the quantum of impact we are going to have while implementing that technology. So it could be an autonomous vehicle, warehouse automation. The most common one is the API, which is my favorite one. And because in Freight Tiger, we use a lot of this technology, and a lot of other companies are also using. So let's go into that. Current Indian landscape, typically our logistics is the 14% of the GDP. And if you take that the cost of goods, it will be somewhere around 17-18%, whereas in developed nation is 7-8% or maybe 10%. And it's a large market, 160 to 180 billion dollar market, but primarily led by the transportation and very small size of 3PL and warehousing. And what is key here for the numbers, the percentage and everything, the key here is how we're different from other nations is our road transportation is very heavy. What it means is the road transportation is the costliest one compared to others. So, obviously the air one you can ignore. But if you take the cost of more, then the ocean is cheapest, then the rail, and then the road and the air. So we are heavily relying on the road transportation. Why? And it has decreased. If you take the 1950s, the rail percentage was around 50%, and now it has gone down to 10% or 15%. Whereas it is different in China or maybe in Europe or even in US, where they have a large, pretty good infrastructure on the railway side, and heavy commodities use the rail network to move their product. And what it does is it decreases the cost of the transportation itself. The railway is almost half of what road transportation is. Similarly, on the waterways, coastal is very limited in our country. I think recently, in last 4 5 years, the Cybermala project, we are trying to invest on that, and something has started from Varanasi to move the product containers from through riverways. So that's a good sign. And second, on the warehousing, as you all know, typically the warehouse for us was a go down, and we were not investing that much money. For warehouse, it's just the storage point, and because of the earlier tax regime, we have warehouse everywhere, and the size of the warehouse was very smaller, so it didn't have the economic scale which can justify investment in terms of technology or systems or the processes. And so companies were not focusing on that, but it's changing a lot, especially because of the omni-channel in e-commerce and also because of the COVID now. But I will also cover, because of COVID, there's a conflict in what kind of strategy I want to have, or one company want to have in warehousing. Coming to this point, as I said, if I compare the logistics in India compared to other nations, especially China and the developed nations, our GDP growth is 13.5%, whereas if I take China, it's lower, or even in US and Europe, it's lower. China is pretty good in EXIM side. EXIM, they have a fantastic infrastructure for export import. What I heard is even for domestic, they also face problems. They may not have that great. Their logistics cost for domestic demand is also high. But having said that, if you on the right hand side, lower down, if you see the comparison and the truck speed, how much is my road network, how much time it takes to clear the container in the port or load in the port, it's very high compared to the other nation. It builds the inefficiency. So in effect, it builds the cost either in terms of the logistics, on the manpower, or in terms of the inventory. So if you see on the left hand side, my inventory cost compared to USA is very high, and this is what USA has done. Since 1980s, they have been able to reduce the inventory cost. Why? Because they have been able to reduce the lead time. And since you reduce the lead time, you have a consolidation of the network, you reduce the inventory cost. And when I say 14% cost, it's not just logistics per se, it also involves the inventory cost. And because of GST, what I've read is many companies have been able to reduce the lead time and thus reduce the inventory cost as much as 25-30%, which is a significant impact. So this is just what you can, everybody is aware of at a high level. If I get into impact of COVID, the first one is, as you've seen last year also, though there have been some improvement in after September, October, we have seen some improvement. Again, there's an impact, though we believe, the impact is temporary. There's a big demand in across many sectors, especially if you look at the tourism, then hospitality, and the automotive sector. Automotive sector has been struggling for last 4 5 years in India, and that's the only sector which has been impacted a lot. And I mean, many of the companies have shut down their plants or maybe reduced the shift timing, the workforce, etc. And even on the FMCG side, you may see the non-essential goods, the demand has reduced. So people are, or people like you and me, are more focusing on the essential ones and have been delaying the any discretionary expenses, like let's say if I have to buy a laptop or mobile handset, we may have might have been delaying it. Supply chain disruption, globally also and domestically as well. So globally, the countries, since they were facing the COVID problem, there has been a problem in the raw material shortage. So whether you take pharma, whether you take automotive, recently most of the companies in automotive are facing the chip shortage. Why? Because in Taiwan, major supplier of the chips, and once the automotive demand went down, they kind of allocated all the chips to some other industries. And now the demand has gone up for automotive, but they are not allocating it. So there's a shortage. Nobody can sustain the allocation like this. So there's a shortage of chips. I think only Toyota has been able to manage it well because they foresee it somehow, and that's the impact. Automotive companies generally work on GIT. I mean, everybody has reduced the inventory level. Now they are being forced to re-look into it. So they are not moving away completely from GIT, but hybrid model. So they have increased the inventory of certain components. Container imbalance, huge shortage in containers in some area. So what I just explained, what is container imbalance for you is, if you export, the container moves from A to B. Now, ideally, that container has to move back from B to A. Now, generally, the demand and supply is not balanced. From A to B, there's a higher demand, and from B to A, there's a lesser demand. So it takes time to move back. So many countries were facing this container imbalance, and because of which the costs go up, costs went up in the container movement sites, and it had a lot of delay in the exit movements. Unavailability of labor, yes, it has impacted not only the production, transportation, um, everywhere we have seen it because the laborers have migrated back to their hometown, and it created a shortage. The secondly, because of social distancing and everything, you cannot have that many workers working in the same space. So you have to maintain the distancing there. Liquidity crunch, shortage of manpower. You're not running the factory at fullest capacity. So you have reduced the working hours, but you have fixed cost. You're still incurring the fixed cost, so your capacity utilization has gone down. So especially the MSME and the SMEs are facing the liquidity crunch. Many of the large companies had deferred the payments to their vendors. So it has a ripple impact, across the value chain. So people are not able to hold the inventory as well. The workforce health, I think this will going to become a paramount now for everyone. More than the profitability, I think most of the companies will be focusing on how they can maintain the health of their workforce. Especially the second pandemic we are seeing in last 1 month, which has a higher impact on the fatality rate. I think this is what people are going to focus on. And uh, the challenge is you have to run the plant, but if you want to run the plant, there are, let's say, some fatalities or some impact. How do you do that? So there's no guidance on that. There's no one single approach. Every company is following what they believe is the best one. Probably over the period of time, we will realize what's the best approach. Just give me a moment. Quickly, so this is my experience, and over the last 2 3 years, you might have read it also. The e-commerce is going to grow in the next 4 5 years. It has been growing, though overall retail. Uh, Typically, the e-commerce in last 1 decade is really focusing on certain category of the product, and which is primarily the mobile handset, laptops, and then in the fashion category. Now, Amazon, Flipkart, everyone is expanding into different categories like food and vegetables, grocery, and they are offering different services kind of. And because of the bandwidth which has increased, the Geo or 4G, and the penetration of smartphone which is increasing day by day, so still hovering around 50%. The And because of the pandemic, now you cannot go out to buy, you are forced to buy on the online. It is going to increase the e-commerce percentage. Typically, it's around across. If I take all the categories, then it's somewhere around 2 to 3%, which we are expecting to go to 5 to 6%. So now, what is it happening is, you have a player like Amazon, Flipkart, which is fine. They will keep on expanding. There are some niche players which has come for furniture or single category. The FMCG brands or other brands now have to, obviously they have to, as a modern trade, which was around 8 to 10% for them, they are supplying to e-commerce companies. Now, that is fine for them because if you look at the distribution network, they can leverage the same distribution network to supply to Amazon or the modern trades like Reliance Retail, etc. The only challenge is when they supply to distributor versus supplying to Amazon and Flipkart, they have a timeline. They give a window to you. So they have to change their processes and system. How can they align it? Till the time it was like I can send it, it will reach to distributor place somewhere around by any day, any time of the day. There's no fixed window. But now they're changing it. Once they're experiencing that part, they are trying to say, okay, can I use it in my traditional distribution? So they are changing that part as well. Second is, how can I sell it directly to customer? Either leveraging the Amazon Flipkart brand platform or on my own platform. Now, what is the impact? The impact is your own distribution network is primarily up to the distributor, where you're selling the whole load of truck, the cases. Now, your warehouse operations or your logistics operation has to change from pallet in or case in to the eaches. You're sending a parcel. How will you leverage that? How will you do that? You are not, till now, you've been working with the 3Ps on a certain kind of network, certain kind of processes. Now you work with 3Ps who are more into e-commerce, and then you have to suddenly change your KPIs. The cost of operation of e-commerce or direct to consumer is different. So how will you change that? Not only that, it has an impact on your marketing now because that to consumer is a different channel and it gives a different kind of experience. So you have a different marketing and that will create a different demand channels. So how will you plan when you're doing the demand planning? It will impact how much I'm going to get it from the direct to customer. Because of the e-commerce, omni-channel, there will be a lot of investment in warehousing. We have already seen it. The warehouse sizes have increased. Now, what happens if you increase the warehouse size? There's economy of scale and scope, so it justifies the investment in automation of warehouse. However, I'm not seeing the full automation like Europe. It will be a semi-automation, primarily into the picking and sorting. Picking is the most cost, 30 to 40% of the labor cost in warehousing is for the picking one. And why is it so? Because picking happens at each level in e-commerce. So when you go general level, it gets the cost goes up and your efficiency and the speed also goes down. But because of the you have a tighter delivery timeline, your delivery experience dictates the customer experience, and that will dictate your overall image and the demand. So that's where you have to speed it up. Secondly, the micro fulfillment center, which essentially means typically you will have warehouses outside the city. Let's say in Mumbai it will be Bhiwandi. In Delhi side it will be Faridabad, Gurgaon side. So it's outside the city, rentals are lower, and you have a larger warehouse footprint. But now, since you want to speed up the delivery, you may have a micro fulfillment center within the city. That's what, or dark stores. So, for example, DMart delivers using the dark stores. So there will be an opening of the micro fulfillment center. However, because of COVID now, what is happening is there's a conflict. Once because of GST, you have consolidated your warehouse network, so you have lesser number of warehouses. But lesser number of warehouses means you are bit away from the end customer or distributor or someone. So your lead time might have increased a little bit. Uh, but now with COVID, there is a scarcity. The transportation scarcity is there. So you would like to come back closer to your customer. If there's a conflict, I think it will get stabilized in the next 6 months to 1 year. Then the last mile. People are companies, not just e-commerce companies, are spending money on last mile route optimization. It has two aspects to it. One is the vehicle utilization. How can I put in as many goods in a particular vehicle so that I can utilize the vehicle as much as possible? So typically utilization will be a 30-40%. Can I have it 80% utilization? The second is how can I club different orders and optimize the route so that it can be delivered as per the customer delivery time? So these are the two areas where people are working in. Many tech-based companies have come up who are offering their services in first mile, last mile. Let's say these delivery, Elastic Run. Then you have a tech-based platform like Local, Scooter, Yoyo, who are providing these services. And not only in e-commerce, now FMCG companies are looking at the distribution. So typically, FMCG companies are responsible for delivering up to the distributor. And after that, distributor takes the responsibility of delivering to the retailers. Now, that's a very high cost component in the last mile, typically managed by distributor, but they are very cost conservative. So it impacts since they are more focusing on cost, it impacts how much I can deliver to the retailers, how many retailers I can cover in a single delivery in a single day. So typically one order per week is a retailer's order. That's how they fulfill. But now Amazon, Udan, they are delivering as per demand. So customers or retailers can order any day and they deliver it the next day using their own platform. So how the FMCG companies are looking at how can I bring in the logistics, let's say experts and the technology to improve my last mile distribution to retailers or kirana stores as per the different constraints. And that's where they're working along with the startups. So as I have said, warehouse automation, last mile routing automation, and order journey and truckload builder. These are the three areas where we are seeing a lot of focus on. Warehousing, I already covered major of the part why warehousing has been coming. One is definitely omnichannel e-commerce, but because of the GST implementation, the larger fulfillment center has come up. The larger fulfillment center kind of provide the economy of scale, which can justify the investment in terms of the technology. Typically, the two kind of technologies you can look into it. One is the storage technology, how you store them, and the majority of the investment it will be on the picking or sorting. So picking it can be fully automated or guided one. So when I say guided one, in the sense the picker is there, it can be guided by pick to light system, pick to voice system, or by augmented reality, or it can be the technology driven system will pick the material from the location and bring it to the picker, and then picker take it up to the packing station. So these kind of two technologies we're looking at it. Just to mention that if you're looking at the picking technologies, generally they are good in handling the cases and the pallets. As you go down, the picking, the hand holding picking is far better by the manual human being than by the machine. So if we have the easiest picking, then generally it's done by the pickers directly rather than by uh, some technology leverage systems. Again, last mile of automation and asset tracking like RFID or warehouse management system for accurate stocks. So you may have a pallet level uh, RFID which shows where the stock is and kind of giving the real time visibility around it. RFID will also have an impact on the manufacturing side where they want to maintain the social distancing. They want to have a capture. If I'm having RFID and there's a sensor, so many people are there nearby. So kind of they will show a heat map and that can help them to see where the more bottleneck is there, where there's a congregation, the gathering of people is happening, so they can reduce it. This is warehousing. Yes, this is what we are doing in Freight Tiger primarily visibility, control tower, analytics. Now, what is visibility? There are two kind of visibility we can talk about. One is the shipment level visibility, which is once the truck moves out of your plant, then we provide the tracking of the vehicle. The second is the item level traceability, which is yet to be done. It will take some time. So currently, uh, so think about it. I mean, Amazon, Flipkart gives you the visibility, or Swiggy gives you the visibility. Where is my order? Okay, and the order cost is what 500, 600 bucks, and the kind of goods you move in a truck is 15 lakhs or maybe 1 crores. But the end customer doesn't have the visibility. Where is it? When is it arriving? Can I have a ETA? And that's where the end customer is asking. When I say end customer, not necessarily like you and me. It can be a dealer. It can be an OEM, and they are expecting where is my truck? When is it going to reach? So for that, if you have to provide, you have to have a visibility in some kind of a visibility system, either in GPS or SIM-based tracking. The SIM-based tracking is far more common now because the the logistics market is highly fragmented in India. So typically, the transporters or 3PLs or even the LSP do not own that many vehicles. So deploying a GPS vehicle on a market vehicle, GPS device on a market vehicle doesn't justify the investment. So SIM tracking is one very OPEX, very simple, simpler in operations and very cheap. So this is what we are trying. Now, it's okay to have a tracking data, but what will do it? So what it does is all the data which is coming from different sources of the location tracking, it will come into a control tower. What control tower does is basically it highlights the exceptions and it enables the logistics function to have a focus on what exception they need to want to manage. And let's say it's an accident of a truck. Typically, you will not come to know on your own if you're not tracking it. But if accident happens, there's a long stoppage. So typically, if you have a control tower, it will show there's a long stoppage of 6 hours or 12 hours for a truck. So somebody will start looking into it because there's a red mark, there's a red flag. They will call the driver or the transporter. What happened? There's an accident. Now they have to obviously replace the vehicle. So that put a pressure on the transporter to act faster. Second is now you can inform the customer that there's been some incident because of which there will be delay. So that what we call exception time, especially for inbound movements when the production is linked to the raw material which is coming to my plant. So they would like to have an accurate ETA. One. Secondly, how can I plan my unloading so that reduces my detention charges? Control tower and analytics, that's going to be long. When we say analytics, it's the combine different source of data, measuring different KPIs, and those KPIs, especially, they were not able to measure because that data was not available to them. So typically, ERP system will have within the data which is available within the premises. So, for example, gate in, gate out, invoice time, loading time, etc. Even the loading time, they will not have the accurate one. What they will have is once somebody has done the transaction in the system. So it has only one timestamp. It doesn't tell you the range of the loading time. And typically, steel cement it takes 12 hours to load, whereas the actual loading time is not more than 2 hours or 4 hours maybe. So the rest of the 60, 70% time is idle. And if you have idle time of the truck, it inbuilds into logistics cost. So what companies are trying to do is, I have negotiated very well with my transporters over past 10 years. I have done all my negotiation. I have reduced the cost. Now, what are the other levers I can reduce the cost? The other levers are how can I help the transporter to run their truck as much as possible? The more the running, the better is the earning for the transporter or the fleet owner, and that's how they will reduce the cost. So idle time is where it's in the loading time, is in the unloading place. So they're trying to reduce that. It's the idle time is there in the yard. I mean, the trucks comes into your yard, they wait there for a whole day, nobody calls them in. So that's where the lot of integrated logistics management system comes up, and that's where the visibility and control tower, which connects and integrate many disparate system into one place. And I'll tell you the technology which enables it. This is what I was talking about: integrated logistics management system. Because of COVID now, there's a kind of two areas. What we're seeing is companies are looking at how can I automate the process which when the truck inside for loading. And typically, what happens? The typical process is there'll be a gating, somebody with punches, gate is slip, some kind of slip, DO slip will be given by the dispatch team or security guard. Then it goes inside, have a empty payment is done. A guy is sitting in the payment bridge. He punches in the what is the weight, or maybe automated weight is there, but he punches in the transaction. Somebody is sitting there. So there's always an interaction between a driver and the somebody from the logistics team. Now that interaction will not reduce because there's always a problem with the COVID now, social distancing. How can I reduce that? Which means it needs to have certain kind of automation in the processes. What kind of automation is possible? So people are trying to deploy RFID kind of in-plant tracking system or yard management system. What it does is basically you deploy RFID and sensor somewhere, and it provides you, if once the truck reaches there, it starts interacting and provides you data. And one implication of it is payment bridge automation. Of late, in last 1 year, a lot of requests we have received from payment bridge automation is basically using different technologies like RFID one, then the camera sensors, the sensors on the payment bridge itself so that it's labeled or not, and then the boom barrier. So there will be no one sitting in the payment bridge. The truck comes, the payment happens, the sensor reads the number plate, automatic payment happens, and it punches into the SAP system. And once the is done, then only the boom barrier opens up, it goes out, go towards the loading or it goes out. So that kind of payment bridge automation they're doing it. Then the other part is currently the trucks go inside with any random phenomena. It's not something related to how is my loading sequence happening. So they want to synchronize my loading sequence, yard, and the indenting system. So they are kind of integrated and make it better optimized so that it reduces my idle time of the truck and also decreases the traffic inside the plant. So that's how the load planning and vehicle optimization happen. The third part is vehicle utilization. So in many industries where there's a possibility of different orders from a different customers in a single area. Now what will happen is the order size will keep on reducing now. So cement especially are trying if their dealers can order less than 10 tons or 5 tons. If you're going to less than 5 tons or 10-ton order, your vehicle size is minimum is 9 ton or 15 ton. So you have to club it. Now manually clubbing of so many orders is not efficient. It takes time. So they're trying to get a solution where system will suggest what is the best vehicle, what are the orders I can combine and put in the worst best vehicle and combine with the integrated with the yard man. So if my vehicle is already available, allocate it, ask him to come inside, go for loading, and go out. So that's how the integrated logistic management system will get into, especially for the in-plant logistics processes. The other part which I didn't cover is automated transport allocation process. So typically you will have certain ways to manage the logistics dispatch. So you will have some delivery orders you would like to allocate to the transporter, and typically you will have L1, L2, L3, or some single transporter based on the annual contract negotiation you have, or maybe 3 years or 6 months, and you would like to allocate that. You may have a very complex allocation process, or you may have a very simple one. Typically it's done manually, but how can you automate that? So that there's a two things they're looking at is, especially the headquarter logistics people, is how can I remove the biasness? So typically there will be always a biasness in the plant level. They will bias towards some logistics transporter. The third is compliance. So if you have L1, L2, L3, ideally you would like to allocate as much loads to L1 compared to L2. So once at the end of the year you see how much L2 is there, but you cannot verify whether it has been published to in L1, has been asked L1 first and then it went to L2, or just directly went to L2 directly. So that compliance perspective, they want to automate and see how much is my compliance, how is my transporter performing in terms of vehicle placement. Is the transporter able to place a vehicle within my SLA? Can I reduce that SLA? And how can I be linked to my transporter performance? And that transporter performance will again be a feedback loop to my transporter allocation. This is one area we have seen. Freight financing and payment automation. As I said, now companies are looking at how can I reduce my freight costs through enabling the transporter to reduce their costs. So one is how can I increase my truck running? But the other part is typically transporter get paid in 6 months or 9 months timeline. So that's working capital. Whereas the transporter has to pay the broker of the fleet on 80% advance and 30% after delivery. So they got the working capital, and typically it's 1 to 2% of the freight cost. So if the companies can leverage their own finance network, for example, a large steel company working with the NBFC or bank, and they say the banks, you can finance my transporter based on my delivery location, what we have done, and based on the performance. Uh, the rate will be what I'm getting. So that rate will be assuming is cheaper than what typically a transporter will get from bank. So that freight financing is happening, but how the banks will kind of um, validate it. So two things they need is the electronic alarm. Now electronic alarm is typically alarm paper form, it's there, somebody fills up the form, and that alarm becomes a kind of legal document. How can I make it electronic so that it goes to banks and they can trigger the finance? The second is electronic proof of delivery. So this is what we electronic proof of delivery they're looking at it. It still will take time. There are many ways to do electronic proof of delivery. It's being done by e-commerce, but it's easy to do in B2C. It's very difficult to do in B2B segments. So technologies are being developed, but adoption is still slower. I think it will increase. Adoption will increase a lot in next 4 to 5 years because of the compulsion of the pandemic that reduce the contact. Quickly now I get into some upcoming technological interventions. What are three broad uh, area, or let's say sections, is what the topic is robotics, which area in terms of the sourcing, make or deliver or returns. Return is also a very important part now. Which area is going to impact, and is it impact will be larger, smaller, and how much time frame we are looking at it. So for example, robotics. I think robotics has already seen use cases, majority of the use cases in manufacturing and now in warehousing. Grey Orange is an Indian-based company which is a fantastic warehousing automation solution, robotic solution for picking picking and storing. Then what it does is robotics is basically very helpful in repeatable tasks. It gives it a task which are repeatable in nature, so it increases the speed, accuracy, and efficiency and precision. It can also help you to do a very dangerous task, so it can be done by robotics. So it has a societal impact as well. Now, what is the impact? Is one, the human beings are moving away from the dangerous tasks. Secondly, the human beings will be focusing more on the high level tasks. So that will be a change. But I'm more talking about the global. Uh, the challenge with robotics is very rigid. Once you deploy it, it's very difficult to change it. And they are not agile. They are focused on certain part of the demand profile, certain part of the process, and that process has to remain more or less fixed. You cannot change it so soon. But the latest technologies are being developed, which can help in more flexible and affordable robotics. Which area primarily make definitely in the production side and deliver because of the warehousing robotics. APIs, application programming interface. What it does is beautifully connects a different system very easily. So what it does is in logistics and supply chain at different areas, different stakeholders. So when I say stakeholder, internal and outside, transporters, the carriers, the shipping companies, the ocean carriers, the CHA, the customs, the port, your own customer. They are different vendors, suppliers. So how will you connect them with the systems? And we need, I really would like to have a very integrated system. Why you want to have an integrated system? Because so that the information which is available across the chain should be similar. There should be one version of truth. And what it impacts is it reduces the goodwill effect. So APIs are really helping in connecting the different systems. It becomes very easy for that. So you can work with different service provider on the software side, but we can all have an integrated system. And leveraging the APIs is the control tower, the analytics dashboard, which senior from right from the logistics executive to senior person can see, having different data sources coming to different one single platform because of the APIs. Where it will have impact is more on the sourcing side because it reduces the search cost. It reduces my transaction cost when I'm buying the material. It's easy to communicate and coordinate. And delivery because now I can have visibility across my delivery movements. What it can also do that it can potentially level the playing field in a small and large customer. Why? Because large customers typically would like to work large vendors. Why? Because is with the smaller customers, smaller vendors, the transaction for the search cost is higher. So generally, they prefer to work with the large vendors. But because of this technology now, it doesn't matter. So they can also work with the smaller vendors. 5G. That will take some time, but 5G, because of the two things will happen, the bandwidth will increase. So you can have more and more connected devices. The second is the latency, which essentially means a lag between the actual thing happens and you get the data. So latency is getting reduced. Now, two things will happen. If you have a more number of devices connected, the Internet of Things, you can have more devices and you can get the data, as many data you want. Obviously, you need to build capability to analyze that data. The second is track and trace at the unit level. Currently, I track at work. What if I want to track a particular case? So I can deploy some devices and through 5G it can keep on giving the data. So I can do it at the track and trace at the unit level. It's why it is important, especially if you look at the case studies globally, when they source it from the, especially the food material from food and some material which is being consumed by the customer, and how can I impact if that food is contaminated. So you want to trace it down to the nth tier, let's say in China, then that this technology can help. Autonomous vehicle, definitely 5G will help. Remote control of material handling, but the 5G is still expensive. So it will take some time. So that's why I'm saying the later part of it. Additive manufacturing, nothing is a 3D printing. What we'll do is it will help in across all the areas. I'll start with the written one. Why? Because now with 3D printing, you can have a mass customization. I can customize at a single unit level. I can give it to you, whatever you want. Obviously, it will take some time. That's why I've divided that at a shorter time frame, there'll be a small to medium impact. But the larger impact will come in a slightly later time frame. You can manufacture 25/7. You can manufacture everywhere. You can reduce supply base. Essentially, it will become the raw material shipping. It will not be a component because you're building the component yourself. So there'll be more the semi-finished product. Everything will get reduced. It will reduce the supply chain overall timeline. There will be a transformation of workforce because they need to be reskilled in 3D manufacturing. There will be a reduction in inventory. And why the return impact? Because once we're doing customized to the customer, there is a possibility that returns will reduce. That's where the impact of 3D printing will come. In blockchain, I'm not an expert. I've heard a lot about it, but it's a complex system. It's a complex technology. Something that will take some time. Generally, what it's doing is the distributed ledger of this information. If I have to give you an analogy, when you transact, when you use a credit card or debit card in a, let's say, some shopping center or anywhere, who validates it? It's not that I am validating it as a customer. Neither I am validating it, neither that online shopping or let's say Amazon. They are not validating it. They are asking Visa and Mastercard to validate it. So the third party is somebody validating it. Now, what if I me and you can interact, where based on certain information, you can validate my credibility. And that's where the blockchain comes. It doesn't need a third party. It will have a huge impact on the financial terms. But primarily, if you're looking at two areas, sourcing side, it has a documentation and contract management. If you have a complex contract management, the blockchain will help. The traceability of it. So through blockchain, you can trace to the nth level and have a lot of more information. The second part on the delivery side. So Musk has done it. TradeLens, they have a product where they have collaborated with IBM and they have developed a blockchain solution. So in a typical ocean movement, if you let's say have a move from Kenya to New York, there will be 250 to 300 documents will be generated by different systems, by different players. So who's going to validate it? So blockchain system helps to validate it, and it reduces the transaction cost, it reduces the approval time, it reduces the overall lead time. So that's where I think, especially complex transportation like ocean, that's where they're working. However, still I believe the impact is smaller, as maybe claimed by a lot of research, but I think it's a very complex system. Delivery drones, everyone is aware of it. Because of lack of time, I will not spend too much time on it. Delivery, don't just think about it. I can replenish faster replenishment at a unit level. I can do it over close distance. It will not replace the last mile. It will complement it. It has already started happening in few of the countries, and I think India recently they have given in principle approval for delivery drones to Swiggy or something. But let's see. It will take. I'll be. I'm still not very confident that it will happen so soon. Internet of Things, I have already covered it. Nisha, how are we on placed in terms of time? I'm almost done, by the way.
Yeah, we are okay, Siddhartha.
Fair enough. So
Yeah.
let me yeah, cover just a couple of slides. I think we've covered most of the stuff. I can share the presentation later on. Autonomous
Sure.
trucks. And why I got fascinated about autonomous trucks is earlier I thought it's just some fancy technology. It's not going to help much. What will happen if I just replace a driver? Just the cost of driver I'm saving. But what will happen if I replace a driver and vehicle can run on its own, essentially continuously. Now the driver stops for 8 hours or 10 hours, obviously it has to take a rest. So suddenly I can reduce the lead by let's say half. If I reduce the lead time, it can help me to reduce the number of distribution center. If I reduce the distribution center, it will help me to overall inventory level. So that's the impact of we are going to have it autonomous trucks, but that will take time. And it's not going to happen so soon in India, at least. May happen in Europe, a little bit in US. Yeah, that's the regions we are looking at. So that will take time, a lot of time, but huge impact. Augmented reality primarily on the shopping experience. So it just combines the physical information with the digital information. So for example, and the paint companies are already doing it. So you have a house, and they can help you if you go to the website. You take a picture of your house or room, and you can choose a paint, and it will show you how it looks like, so you can take a better decisions. Then in warehousing side, we are looking at when I have to do a picking, if I can augment it with the using the Glass or Microsoft Glass, I can augment it with the information. So either pick to light instead of pick to light, it's a guidance by the class itself. You can take this path, this is the rack, this is the one you have to pick it up, the scanning and everything. So that's where the augmented reality will happen. But majority on the customer experience, the shopping side. Uh, then Internet of Things. Again, a lot of hype was in Internet of Things in last 7 8 years, but it didn't deliver that much result as we were expecting. So it has slowed down a bit. I think it's primarily on the. It's not because of the technology itself. It's more about how can I leverage the data and do more analysis. Because generating a lot of data. What do I do with this data? So you have to then build up a technical stack which leverage this data, build the analytics around it. So I think companies are still struggling how to leverage this data. It will be primarily used in predictive maintenance of the machines. So it can generate certain data about using the sensors, how is it the machine is behaving. So it can help you to reduce the breakdowns. And that is a significant impact, especially in the production side, which is dependent on these large machines. It can give you at the shipment at the unit level shipment visibility, or also can help in picking and packing operations. I think Nisha, I have covered most of this stuff. Yeah,
Yeah, that was absolutely insights packed and very detailed and great. Thank you so much for doing the session for us again. And we are now open to questions. Does anyone have anything to ask, Siddhartha?
Hi, Siddhartha. This is Rishi here. Are you able to hear me?
Hi, Rishi. Yes, I can.
All right. Wonderful presentation. Very, very interesting. Slides and your thoughts. I was listening very keenly. In fact, I do agree to most of the things you say, and some of things were good learnings as well for me. So thanks once again. I just wanted to ask you two questions. In one of the slides, you mentioned that the decentralization or the forward deployment of the inventory at the more near locations is more of a temporary phenomena, as it will go back to the larger warehouses, if I understood and read that correctly. So if you can elaborate more on that. My question is more related to the fact that will COVID change things permanently in certain ways, and would this be one of them, or are we expecting this to go back to the previous?
So, if I understood the question correctly, you are saying because of the COVID, how the network distribution network, or especially on the housing network, will change or will remain constant as today.
Right.
Is it your yeah?
That's right,
I
Siddharth.
think yeah. I think there's no clear answer as of now, and the reason being there's a lot of uncertainty around how the spending is going to behave, especially in
Mhm.
India, where we have a large population. Now we are looking at the second wave. Will there be a third wave? Fourth wave? How's the impact going to happen? So a bit of a confusion there. People on companies are not ready to, and it's I mean, it's changing the distribution network is the long-term exercise, more of a strategic exercise people do. If I have to decide how many number of warehouses and the location, it's a decision which I take, which has an impact of 4 to 5 years down the line. So they'll be very conscious about if I take this decision, what's the impact, and so it will not be an easy decision to make. The conflict is once the GST happens, it gives the opportunity to companies to consolidate their warehousing network. So they reduce the, let's say by 30%, if I'm not wrong, FMCG companies have been able to reduce the number of warehouses by 30%. Now, obviously, what happens, it will go to near the consumption center, definitely it comes to the warehouse will remain. For example, it will remain in Mumbai. Nobody will replace the Bhivendi warehouse, but it will become bigger. Now I will start sending from Bhivendi to RDC, let's say in Karnataka or something.
Yeah.
Now, this since there's especially in the terms of driver shortage is there, it has increased and there are different rules. For example, Maharashtra has said if you have to enter today in the Maharashtra state border, then the driver needs to have a COVID report. Now, who will get this report? So that will delay and increase my lead time. Now, to, uh, to reduce that impact, I may like to have a more warehousing center somewhere near, let's say, Mumbai, Bhivendi, and Shimbur also. So I may have more and more warehousing center. But that's a confusion. The confusion is what timeline I'm looking at. Because once I invest in it, if I change my network, it is valid for 4, 5 years. So that's it. The
Right.
confusion, the clarity is still not there. I think people will
Mhm.
wait for another 2, 3 months and see how things pan out. If my vaccination is done quickly, which everybody hopes so, by this year end, if the vaccination is done, then the impact of pandemic will reduce drastically, and then I can go ahead with my same network which I have. That's what I think.
Sure. Thanks so much, Vivek, and I think I agree to that. One another quick question before I know Vivek has a question as well. Is on the smaller size or mid-size, say retail companies, which are more locally placed in the regions of the country. How can they take advantage of the more advanced logistics networks or technology to reduce their costs, because they don't have the volumes that the national distributors or the RDCs have to be able to take advantage of the the new technology or the networks. For example, Freight Tiger could be one of the players. But this is something I wanted to understand from you. Are there products or the services available to support these local heroes, which are like South only or West only kind of people? Any light on that?
Sure. So last mile optimization is one area which I'm looking at. I've seen retailers are working with. And for retailers, it doesn't matter. I'm pan India or because ultimately, if you are optimizing the last mile, it's for that city. So you might be
Right.
optimizing for Bangalore, or you might be optimizing for Chennai, and these two are independent. How optimize when Bangalore doesn't matter how I optimize Chennai, and whether I have presence in Delhi or not doesn't matter. So local optimization is very last mile optimization is very city specific, and that's where I think the companies are looking at two things. How can I reduce my number of vehicles? So typically retailers will have a dedicated vehicle. When I say dedicated, lease vehicle on a monthly rental basis. So how can I reduce my number of vehicles and uh, still can deliver or cover as many my stores as possible? So this is one area, one of the things. So they will have the orders, dispatch planning orders, which will come from the system, and if we get feed into the this last mile optimization system, it will combine them basis on your constraints and tell you how the route should be taken, considering different constraints. You may have a constraint like a shop in a mall cannot be your own shop somewhere outside the mall. It's easy to maintain your timeline. You can still open it by 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock if you want early delivery. But in a mall, there are some restrictions. You cannot open it by 9, by 11, or you cannot have delivery within a certain timeline. So that kind of constraints can be built in. So last mile, I'm looking at it. Warehousing, because of the volume, I think automation will not help. It's automation, more than the automation, is more about if you have a multi-category, at least the process side can help, but not the technology. I will not look into technology side. A bit of a semi decent warehouse management system is good enough. I think you don't need to have a very uh, complex warehouse management system also. So that can help primarily and last mile. And the third is the omni-channel. If the retailer uh, competing with the online, they want to also serve the customer through omni-channel. That's where the technology can help. And one area is inventory management. Omni-channel in majority of the cases have suffered because the inventory order management system is different from my inventory management system. How can I connect it? And that's where the APIs and everything work. So, for example, when we did the omni-channel mobile store, we were fortunate enough somehow the IT team was fantastic. And while we're taking the order from standard ATM, we will check whether the inventory is available in my platform nearby store or not. If it's not available, it will say the inventory is not available. And the order will not get processed. So inventory visibility is important. Once I have the inventory visibility, how can I combine the order management with my existing warehouse processes? Because now I have the only channel where I have to pack it, pick that, and AWA bill, I'll put it, and FedEx guy will come and pick it up. That's again the challenge is there. And all the compliance, retail warehousing generally, the compliance is there in the sense theft should not happen and inventory issues are there. So it has to convert back to my system that yes, it has been dispatched. So those integrated system will be required. But primarily into last mile, I'm looking at it. That's where the leverage can be taken.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Siddhartha. Maybe I'll connect also offline with you to discuss more on this. Right.
100%,
Yeah.
anytime.
Thanks so much again for this wonderful presentation for us. Vivek, go ahead and ask your question, please.
Okay, so how do you see the infrastructure built for postal logistics? I mean, let me say, let's be positive and hopeful that it will get built. That's the only thing I can say. But these things take time. Uh, I hope the postal logistics should improve because that will help us to save a lot of money around the freight cost, especially heavy commodities like steel or fertilizer or cement. And cement is not applicable for postal logistics, but generally steel and fertilizers or coal, it will be better if you can move that. And not just the around the postal logistics, how can I connect it to the hinterland? Let's say somebody in North, ICDs, we have to build more, and it has to be more in multimodal. So dedicated freight corridor from that's Ludhiana to actually port, JNPT port or Mundra. So there should be some development, but I think it's just in the 5 years. It has to improve. I mean, it has to improve. There's no other option. It will take 10 to 15 years. Where, as I said, there's an ease of doing business pressure, and one of the criteria is how good is the country in the exim side. What I know is JNPT and the Ministry of Shipping have been trying to build a integrated system. If you search for it, I think you've heard PCS. They call it PCS, Post Connectivity System. So you have different stakeholders. One is JNPT as an organization. Now they have a terminal managed by Maersk or ADP World, and then there'll be a customer, and there'll be a transporter who's bringing the container, and then there is a driver, and there's a customer. So how can I bring all of them together? So
Yeah.
they are trying to build near JNPT yard itself where the driver goes in wait they're trying to reduce congestion, and they have initiated two initiatives like directly from the port it goes to the customer without going to CFS. So typically, the port logistics has been dependent on the CFS network a lot in India, but that dependency they want to reduce because essentially is increasing my lead time. But the end customers are also not so adaptable in terms of using the direct report logistics or this kind of initiative. They still would like to work with CFS to hold their inventory there for some time. So it will take some time. I think the second question is container shortage. How do we see to mitigate the risk? Difficult one. They are. I mean, this is a time when all the ocean carriers are taking advantage of it. If you look at the rates now, I just read it. Rates are shot up, and the ocean carriers are taking advantage of it. Not ocean carriers. I met with someone who's working in a very large international 3PL, works in the ocean air. Now, because of the COVID and container shortages, companies are moving through air charters, and with each air charter, they make hell of money. So all these ocean carriers, I mean, Musk has a great result last year. They are making a lot of money. So they will not solve this container shortage so easily. And then there's a trade challenge. China, US, they are fighting with each other. So until that imbalance goes away, this container shortage will remain. I'm hoping Europe is opening up now. China has opened up it now. So that will solve a little bit of it. But it will take some time. But ocean rates are not going to go down so easily. It will remain there for 3 months, I think.
Thank you, Siddhartha.
Thank you for those questions and thank you, Siddhartha.
Thanks a lot, Nisha, for the opportunity. Thanks, everyone, for coming.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
And
Thank you.
just have a nice weekend and happy and safe family.
Thank you so much, Siddharth, and thanks, Nisha.
Thank you so much, Siddharth. Thanks, Nisha.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.